recording. Gosh dang. Oh well. Guess we'll just move on. That was like my outtake bit there, but
Oh, so
um,
it's just
I was
welcome
like,
to
all
the
right, there's like
show.
two or three, conversations there I could put in that, that first video. Wasn't recording, so whatever. All right, welcome to episode 93 of Farm to Markets. This is the show where participants only get 5 minutes to state their opinions, and the person with the most time at the end wins, but there are no prizes. Today we are talking about T-bills, retail spending, the gym office, earthing, and bubble tea. The Congressional Budget Office regularly updates its long-term budget forecast and says that the U.S. debt held by the public will surpass gross domestic product by this fiscal year, and that interest on that debt will equal about 3/4 of discretionary non-defense spending will equal 3/4 of discretionary non-defense spending. So by 2031, it will be as large as discretionary non-defense spending. We've talked about this before. It's been all over the Wall Street Journal yesterday and today. How concerned are you about putting people in treasury bills right now? They can't hear you, Alex.
Whoops. So as of right now, I think just about anything below 10 years is probably not terribly concerning. But once you get into the 2030s, which is a date they've alluded to, a lot of things start to happen that start to create a lot of problems. We mentioned, the interest on the debt is going to start to get pretty large by then. But there's a couple other interesting things that are going to happen. First of all, unless, this all could be wiped out by new legislation, but assuming nothing changes, Medicare's trust fund is scheduled to run dry in about 2031-ish. And in 2032, Social Security is roughly assumed to follow suit. Now, if nothing changes with Social Security, that's not that big of a deal because by law, it can't pay out more than it collects. But Medicare doesn't have that restriction. So all of a sudden, if you don't like deficits now, just wait until Medicare spending starts going into a deficit. All that means is basically the spending is going to ramp up, and I don't think you could possibly tighten the belt or raise taxes in any meaningful way to catch up with that spending unless you do significant reforms on any of those things. The other important thing to note is that all of that means probably, and I know I've mentioned this before, that once you start hitting 180% debt to GDP, everybody defaults. We're probably, because we're a sovereign currency issuer, never going to actually default on a payment unless politically we decide to. That means they're going to print, and they're going to print a lot. And that means if you're locking in at a 4.25% 30-year treasury, you're probably going to be taking it on the chin for 20 years after you buy that treasury. The first 10 may be okay. 20 years from now, 30 years from now, you may seriously regret that decision. So again, short-term treasuries may look pretty attractive, and I don't know if inflation is going to be too big of an issue for the next few years, but looking down the road, it could be a very serious problem due to a lot of spending that's coming down the pike.
Yeah, I agree with Alex in a lot of senses. I figured we were talking about the short-term government debt if we're talking about T-bills. Right now, I'm not recommending any long-term, certainly not 10 or 20 year or longer treasury debts. But this is the short term, the 1 to 3 years. Right now, I have no concern. There's certainly some big budget issues going on right now. The credit rating downgrade certainly didn't help the U.S. debt. The spreads on credit default swaps on U.S. debt is actually higher than it was 10 years ago, which I found pretty interesting. But not concerned about buying T-bills. The way I see it is there isn't really any better place to go for the return versus the risk. I mean, what's the alternative? If T-bills go belly up, then we're all in it pretty deep, as far as I'm concerned. I guess you could put your money in the coffee can and you could hug your guns, but at least at the end of the day, I'd like a seat at the table in case the world doesn't end, which a lot of these articles make it seem like it is. Now, Wall Street loves boogeymen, and there's always a boogeyman under the bed. And part of our job is learning about each of these boogeymen and determining whether we should put a pot on our heads and call ourselves Chicken Little, or we should take a more pragmatic approach. Now, like Alex, there's other things that do concern me, particularly whether voters will hold policymakers' feet to the fire in years to come, specifically regarding Social Security and Medicare. But right now, T-bills, I think they're perfectly fine.
For all the discussion about long-term treasuries being a big risk, the market certainly doesn't believe that to be true. I'm looking at the Wall Street Journal's bond paper here, and it's saying that 30-year treasuries are paying 4.35%. At the same time, the 6-month treasury bill is paying 5.5. We have a significant inverted yield curve at this point, which suggests that the markets think that interest rates are coming down. If interest rates are coming down, that actually means that it might be better to buy long. I'm not doing that. I, like you gentlemen, I'm a little bit gun shy about buying long-term debt for a variety of reasons. But in terms of default, the markets don't think that long-term debt's in a serious risk of defaulting. My biggest concern is that we have hundreds of millions of Americans who are in more debt than they ever have been in history. I think we're going to talk a little bit about that later on in this morning or this afternoon. And that's my biggest concern. What does a desperate government do when the majority of its citizenry is also desperately in debt? That's the $100,000 question, or the $100 trillion question.
$32 trillion question as of
Yeah.
the last.
Well, that's
debt
just
ceiling rate, but
that's just the debt. Well, what about all the obligations for Medicare and Medicaid?
I know, yeah.
Social Security.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there's only like 3 things you can do, right? I mean, you can either reduce your spending, reduce the debt, or increase taxes. Like
There's
outside
4
of that-
things. You can also go to war and steal other people's stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I guess I was thinking in terms of like personal budgets.
Oh,
But,
okay.
but yeah, I mean, that's an option too. What makes you say that? Like, we're like,
You jumped to that way too fast.
Well, prior to Western society, that's how you got rich. You went overseas, you went to war, and you took other people's stuff. It's a relatively new phenomenon that we don't do that.
Yep.
right. But like, if we invaded China, I mean, like, what? I mean,
Well, yeah, you used to carry off all their gold and young people as slaves and stuff like that, but now you just bomb them until you don't have to pay them back, I guess.
I guess I'm just curious because it's like, the Chinese have a ton of debt. They have like a bunch of real estate issues. They're not in good shape. Europe's not
Right.
in particularly good shape. I don't really know how Japan compares to China and Europe, but from what I've heard, they're not particularly great either. So is this just like Mexican standoff where it's just like, well, we probably should have been more responsible. Let's just call this one a mistake, and then we just forgive everybody's debts and go from there. I mean, like, yeah. What do you do at that point? I'm asking so somebody uses up more of their time.
Well, for 3 long decades, I've been telling people to avoid debt like the bubonic plague. I've done my fair share of getting the word out that debt is bad, both at the government level, the corporate level. I've self-financed all of my business endeavors for the last 30 years. I think debt is something that's, if anything, it's a necessary evil, possibly, but it's a necessary evil you should get out of as rapidly as you possibly can. And anybody who wants to use debt as a way to enhance their economic position in life, you do so at your own peril, in my opinion.
So you don't do that, and then what do you do?
That's the $100 trillion question, because what will the government do when a majority of its voters are also desperate? Do they go after the people who never use debt?
Right.
I don't know.
I don't know. It's a good question. All right. So Americans boosted. Okay, so retail sales. So inflation has basically been leveling off and coming down according to the CPI and whatever the Fed uses, CEP, I think it is. But according to the Wall Street Journal, Americans boosted their retail spending last month at the fastest pace since the start of the year. as consumers continue to bolster the resilient U.S. economy. When do you think that retail spending is going to level off at some point? Because that is like the only thing that has been consistently going up has been retail spending. Everything else seems like it's cooling off a little bit. And by everything else, I mean inflation.
Yeah. So to me, we can argue about a lot of the details, like reshoring industry, supply chain problems, et cetera, et cetera. Ultimately, inflation does something really interesting to people's brains. It's actually a stimulant to the economy in kind of a weird and perverse way. So let's say you have $1,000 and you want to buy a new smartphone. Now, if you believe that $1,000 is going to be worth roughly the same now as it is next year, you can buy a new phone now, or you can wait a year and get another year out of yours. If you believe that your money is going to appreciate over time, that's called deflationary. It's called deflation. You think your money's going to be worth more tomorrow than it is today. You will probably hold on to it as long as possible so that it becomes as valuable as possible so that you can buy more stuff with the same amount of dollars. But if you believe that it's going to be worth less tomorrow, you'd be stupid not to spend it right now, because every day you hang on to it, it's worth less. And even though inflation has gone, the rate of inflation has gone down year over year, you're still at 3.2%, what, CPI inflation. So people, whether they consciously or unconsciously know this, they know that tomorrow their money is worth less than it is today. So the thing you do it with that is you spend it, because you're never going to get more for your money than you are going to get it right now. So until people believe that their money is going to be worth, reasonably close next year as it is today, they're just going to keep spending it. So I don't think you're going to see consumer spending level off until people believe that inflation is under control, even if it is or isn't.
That's an interesting point, and we certainly do see that in these kind of environments. Purchasing power is worth more today than it is tomorrow, especially if you think inflation's going higher. But I'm wondering if this is just if the higher consumer spending is a result of higher inflation. I mean, inflation goes up, goods cost more, consumers are forced to spend more. So it doesn't really seem that, that mind-blowing to me that consumers are spending more when they're forced to spend more. And also, I think what a lot of folks are doing is just putting more on credit cards. The credit card debt is going up quite a bit. So just because they might be strapped for cash doesn't mean that they're not going to be using their credit card. So I think there's a lot of that going on as well. Now, will spending level off? Absolutely. It's kind of like asking, is it going to rain sometime? Yeah, absolutely. I just don't know when.
I think we got to the point where we got moral hazard going on here. As I think that for so long, we felt like when we do really stupid financial things, that the government will come in and they'll save us. And I think we're just getting close to the end of that cycle, because up to this point, the government has been able to bail us out. But there's going to be a point where the government can't, and that's when people will stop spending. But as long as they feel like they have access to government help, if they do collective stupidity, I think we're going to continue to see more of the same.
I guess I have two thoughts. One is that sometimes I wonder how retail spending data is skewed, because if the average consumer is like my wife, she'll buy a lot of consumer goods with the idea that she's going to return 90% of them, particularly with clothing. She'll buy, I'll be like, look good, oh my gosh, and then she's like, oh, don't worry, I'm going to return most of this. I just wanted to try on some stuff and see what fits and what doesn't. And then she'll send, most of it back and keep like one or two things. And from what I've heard, other people do that as well. And I wonder how that gets counted in retail sales data, because it just seems that electronic, and I sound like I'm from a different generation, but when you have e-commerce, it's not like you go into like JCPenney and try on a pair of pants and like, oh, they don't fit, I got to find something else. Is that you order all this stuff, it counts as a purchase, but then you have to return it. And I wonder if that skews retail sales data a little bit. The other thing is that I'm not horribly concerned about the surging credit card debt, because number one, from what the St. Louis Fed tells me, is that retail credit card debt is still a lower percentage of discretionary incomes for most people than it has been in years. Basically, meaning that people are getting paid. People who are putting money on credit cards have higher incomes and therefore are able to service the debt on that credit card. So nothing I've seen. It seems to me like the economy is just getting bigger, and then you also have companies pumping out these reward things. I mean, reward points. Whereas that basically, if they say, hey, if you spend $3,000 on this card over a 3-month period, we're going to give you like 75,000 airline miles. Or if you spend X amount on this card, we're going to give you the gold lounge at whatever airport. So I'm wondering if more people, if the rewards are getting better, and there's podcasts and websites and like columnists who spend like their day analyzing the best credit card rewards, and then people I think go on there and like put a bunch of like their regular spending on these credit cards, and then meet whatever period that they have to get reward points, and then dump their credit card. So I'm wondering if that skews some of the data as well. I don't know. All right, so the Wall Street Journal had this article about the gym office. So instead of having a gym at the office, the gym is your office. So you go to the gym, you work out, you take a shower, and then you come back out and you go find yourself a seat somewhere in the gym, and then you do your work there. And supposedly this saves you time. But like, what do you think about having like doing your work in a gym?
I think it's pretty cool. I'm in favor of remote work, and I think you're just going to see more of these kinds of things. As long as you're maintaining the same level or increasing your productivity, I don't see it as an issue for people who, can get all of their work done. So if employees are happier, healthier, I think it's great.
I fully support it. This seems like a great idea. If we didn't do what we do and kind of had the attire that we wear, I can see myself doing that. There's a lot of friction I have to overcome to get to the gym, particularly wearing suits. And you got to press the suit, put it in a nice carrier, put it in your car, keep it nice, go to the gym, hang it up, do your workout, put it on, put your dirty clothes away, and rinse and repeat. You just going to the gym in your sweats, working out, putting your sweats back on, and going upstairs, drinking a smoothie, having a protein bar, and then going to work. Oh man, that'd be great. And then at lunch you could go do another workout, something like that. So I could see why this would be attractive for a lot of folks.
For a lot of folks, the gym is their third place. They spend the most of their time either at home or at work, and the third place is that's their third most significant place that you go. And for many folks, it's the gym. I think that this fits that bill for those folks. If you remember the show Cheers, where everybody hangs out at the bar, and that's kind of like their community. I think that there's also a gym community where it's very much the same. And for a lot of folks, the more time they spend at the gym, the more socially connected they feel.
Yeah, I'd be in favor of this, especially if it was down. Like, I would not want to do my work in the actual gym, but if there's like a floor upstairs, I go up there, I do my work, and then come down, like work out or whatever. Yeah, I'd be in favor of it.
Something we've talked about before is it doesn't have to be an office in the gym. It could be a gym in the office. If we had like a bench press in the back, and like we have a pull-up bar, but if we had like medicine balls and stuff, that'd be pretty cool.
You should talk to your landlord, see about negotiating an increase in the rent to provide those sorts of amenities.
The key phrase is increase the rent.
Scrooge, our landlord.
All right. So I don't know. I don't know if you've heard of earthing, which is also known as grounding, which refers to the discovery that the bodily contact with the Earth's natural electric charge stabilizes the physiology at the deepest levels in your body, reducing inflammation, pain, and stress. And it also improves blood flow, energy, and sleep, and greater well-being. Such effects are profound, systemic, and foundational, and often develop rapidly. Earthing is as simple as routinely walking barefoot outdoors and or using inexpensive grounding systems indoors while sleeping or sitting. Practices that restore lots of needed electric connection with the earth. I guess some 20 studies to date have reported the intriguing evidence and wide and significant physiological improvements when the body is grounded versus non-grounded. Do you think you're going to ground yourself there, Alex?
Well, I'm pretty much out of time, so this is pretty much it here. Most of those studies say that there's minimal evidence about like the electromagnetic fields or grounding or anything, but they're all pretty convinced that spending time outside and in nature is good for you. So I'm going to say go outside, go for a hike. Don't worry about buying expensive things for your bed or special shoes. Most of that's just placebo effect.
It always entertains me reading these things because it reminds me of how far we've come, that we have to spend like $40,000 on a cold plunge bath, and we have to install like grounding things in our home so we can touch the ground. Just last night, me and Ellie walked barefoot down to the goat stables, and I guess we got our grounding for the day. But to me, it's just second nature. If you walk barefoot, you jump in the lake. Is it good for you? Yeah, but it's not something I ever thought about. It's pretty entertaining, this article was.
When I start seeing lots and lots of sources citing that the people who live to be 107-year-olds attribute it to walking barefoot and having electrical connectivity with the ground, I'll start giving it a different consideration.
It makes you feel smarter when you walk barefoot on the ground. I saw a lot of kids do that in college. That was the trend when I was in college. You'd go barefoot everywhere, and I was like, oh, this guy's a philosopher. I never really did it, but I don't know. Probably.
Did he live in a barrel too?
What's that?
Did he live in a barrel instead of a dorm?
He was my roommate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is he a philosopher?
No, I did have that one guy who jumped out of a tree barefoot and ruptured that bursa in his foot, swelled up. We were like taken to the emergency room. It was terrible. All right, last question here. Bubble tea is becoming like, I don't know if you know what bubble tea is. Like, I don't. It's like some sort of tea. They put these I don't even know what the heck it is. Some sort of like
I'll take it from here, Tom. I know exactly what it is. So it's called bubble. It's also called boba. Most people are familiar with the term boba tea. It's fantastic. It comes from Taiwan, and what it is they use tapioca. It's from like the canva plant or something like that. They use the starch and they turn it into these balls. Tapioca pudding. It tastes very similar to that, but they make flavored shakes, different fruits, purees, things like that. It's fantastic. So it's basically like drinking a milkshake with like large tapioca pudding balls. It's kind of like the rice. If you like at Indian buffets, it's like the sweet rice. They put milk in it, brown sugar, cinnamon, kind of like that. It's delicious.
I think I would try it as a dessert. I don't think I'd want to drink it as a refreshment, but it actually looks pretty delicious if you eat it as a dessert.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it looks. I don't know. I've been just like on my drive home. I see it a number of places, and my daughter, some one of her friends brought the beads. I don't know, what are they, like tapioca balls or whatever they are, to her classroom, and she said they're delicious. So I don't know. I might have to try it, but I've been seeing it everywhere.
You don't like Frank Lloyd Wright houses, and you don't even know what boba tea is. So I think my my argument on your culture is is right on.
Well, maybe I'll start walking around barefoot, and then you can think.
There you go. Redeem yourself.
That'll be my MO in the office. I'll be like, who's the barefoot guy? I'll be like, oh, that's Tom.
He's a philosopher.
When it comes to outdoor electricity, I think of you more as like Chuck McGill from Better Call Saul.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think if anybody has to go barefoot, it's probably Joe. Like when you're 5'6", you need shoes. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
I do walk around barefoot quite a bit at home.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's it for episode 93. We'll see you again next week.